we welcome you back into the Rowdy Studios. I'm Bassmasters. That's Bob Pockrass of SceneDaily.com. Let's talk a little bit, Bob, about the strategy racing we've seen. Not necessarily just the last 2 weeks, although obviously with fuel mileage, it was very evident the last 2 weeks, but track position racing.
Asking me about strategy?
Come on.
Strategy is to get to the front.
Yeah.
Strategy is cross the finish line first.
Well, how do you cross the finish line first, Bob? I mean, look.
Have the fastest car?
Well, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure that's the case anymore. What do you think is contributing? First of all, there's two ways to look at it. One is these fuel mileage races, they come in cycles, and sometimes you get two in a row, and that's just part of racing, and that's the way it is. The other way would be there are factors that are pushing us to have more of these races. Which way do you think it cuts this time?
Well,
I
think tires is a factor, and that's not saying anything bad about the tires. In fact, you know, the problem is sometimes they're too good. They're not wearing out very much, so you don't need to necessarily come in for 4 tires.
Not only that, but you don't need to manage your tires.
Exactly.
And so when you guys manage their tires, they come and go during a run.
Exactly. And if you're in the back and you're trying to get to the front, you can make a certain amount of run and then.
Right. You might get aggressive, pass a bunch of people, and then stall out.
I mean, heck, you saw Kyle Busch. What was it, New Hampshire in July, where he tried to come back and he burned his bead.
Yep.
A
good example of that.
Yeah, so you saw it at New Hampshire, and then this time around at New Hampshire, everything seemed to be, you know, nobody could pass, I guess, or everybody saw that and said, boy, we can't push it that hard. You know, so you have the tires. The other thing is, as talking about Kyle Busch, he says the cars just seem tougher to spin out right now, and so that means fewer cautions. Everybody has kind of expected a caution in the last 30 or 40 laps of a race, and those haven't come. So that'll impact fuel mileage as well.
And the other thing is there something to the notion that with the cars more tightly controlled from a chassis perspective, from a body perspective, they are running more similar speeds, and that means that advantage that you need to pass somebody is much harder to come by, and now comes seemingly mostly with clean air. Yeah,
it's certainly everybody says there's much tighter pack and more difficult to pass at times at certain tracks, and that tends to lend yourself to a fuel mileage or track position race. So guys would rather risk it on fuel mileage than pit and finish 15th or 20th. Although, I mean, at Chicago we saw most of the guys came in, you know, or most of the guys, you know, everybody made that one last stop and said, okay, we're gonna try to push it to the limit. But everybody kind of did that strategy. I think last week I would say we saw a little bit more
mixed.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting too, because if everyone goes on the fuel strategy, then you're actually not risking that much to do that.
Yeah, it just depends on what your fuel mileage is.
It's just a question of like who gets the better mileage or who saves the most gas.
Or who gets in the. I mean, the other thing, and this was an issue at the start of the year more than the end of the year.
But it was an issue at New Hampshire for Jeff Gordon.
It certainly was. You know, getting your gas tank full and making sure you get every drop in there.
One more factor I'd ask you about, which could possibly contribute to this, and I'd love your opinion on it. You know, you talk about a lack of cautions. Are guys more aware of the punitive nature of the point system when it comes to wrecking? I mean, it's so detrimental to you to make a move that puts you in the wall or takes yourself out of the race. You got to protect against the downside, don't you? You got to try really hard to avoid those yellow flags or to be the guy that causes it.
Yeah, I don't get that sense. I mean,
you don't get the sense that guys are racing differently based on the incentives in the points system.
No, I mean, I don't get the sense that anybody is out there just trying to conserve equipment because they can't afford. I mean, if you're in the chase, you're going to need top 10s to win it.
Right.
And if you're not in the chase, who cares if you finish 30th?
Right.
Right? I mean, you better to finish in the top 10. So I don't see guys playing a conservative and say, oh, I can't risk spinning out. I mean, I think they're racing the way they either normally race or even a little more riskier.
Just avoiding the trouble.
Yeah. I mean, trouble just hasn't happened. So, you know, go at Dover, we'll see.
Dover's not going to be a fuel mileage race.
I would hope not.
Well, I would think not, right? I mean, it doesn't have a history of being a fuel mileage race.
No, it doesn't. But as long as you're adding fuel to a car.
Depends on where that last caution
and there's
falls.
there's no fuel gauge on these cars because NASCAR doesn't allow telemetry or any sort of electronics.
Right.
You know, I don't even think you could have a fuel gauge like you do in your passenger car, because that still is
not accurate
still
enough
electric.
anyway.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between being E and SOL. You know, so it really wouldn't help you too much, would it?
All right, thanks, Bob Pockrass of SceneDaily.com. We're out of time for the moment. We'll see you next time from right here in the Rowdy Studios.
Rowdy.com. Say it like it is.
Say what like it is?
Rowdy.com.